So think about when you first see, like, that little bit of gray hair suddenly appearing on your dachshund's muzzle, right?
Oh yeah, it instantly feels like a countdown clock.
Exactly. It's like usually when we talk about a pet getting older, there's this quiet, almost unspoken dread that creeps in.
Right, you notice them taking a few extra seconds to stand up from their bed
Or
or...
you see that kind of cloudy tint in their eyes,
It's,
and your brain just immediately fast forwards to the saddest possible conclusion. We tend to treat aging like it's a terminal diagnosis.
we really do. It becomes this whole narrative of inevitable, unmanageable decline. And the tragedy of that mindset, honestly, is that we start actively grieving, while the dog is literally still right there in front of us.
Yeah, just wagging their tail, fully present.
Exactly. I mean, the goal of this deep dive isn't to somehow, cure aging, because attempting to turn back the biological clock just leads to frustration for you and, honestly, a lot of stress for the dog. Healthy aging is really all about adaptation. It's about shifting your mindset from simply managing a decline to actively designing an environment where their specific aging biology can actually thrive.
And to do that, we're looking at a really fascinating transcript today. It's dedicated entirely to senior care, but specifically tailored for dachshunds.
Which is such a unique breed structurally,
Oh, totally. The source is just packed with biological insights into their physical health, how their cognition changes, and like the actual mechanics of their emotional well-being.
It covers a lot of ground.
It really does. Okay, let's unpack this. Because whether you currently have a senior dog snoring on your couch right now, or you just brought home an 8-week-old puppy, or I don't know, you're just endlessly curious about how mammalian bodies and minds adapt to time, this completely rewires how you look at the aging process.
It really reframes everything.
But before we get into the mechanics of care, I feel like we have to define our terms here. When does a dachshund actually cross that threshold into being a senior?
Well, that timeline actually surprises a lot of people. I think human psychology desperately wants a single universal retirement age.
Right. Yeah, we want a specific birthday where everything officially changes.
Exactly. But biologically, veterinary medicine generally considers a dachshund to be entering their senior life stage around 7 to 9 years of age.
Wait, 7 to 9. Which, if we look at the lifespan of this specific breed, feels really premature.
It sounds young, I know.
Because the source material notes that dachshunds routinely live 12 to 16 years, right? And in many cases, far beyond that.
Right. And if you just do the basic math on those numbers, the senior phase isn't just a brief little epilogue at the end of their life.
Yeah.
If a dog enters the senior stage at age 8 and lives to 16, that stage represents a full half of their entire life.
Wow. So if their life is a movie, hitting the senior stage isn't the rolling credits, it's practically the entire third act.
I love that analogy.
And a third act deserves its own character development, its own plot, and, careful pacing, not just being an afterthought.
What's fascinating here is how our human perception of time kind of works against us. We tend to fear this sudden, before and after cliff edge of aging.
We project our own anxieties onto them.
We really do. We assume that one day the dog is young and robust, and then the very next morning they're just old and fragile. But the biological reality of this third act is incredibly forgiving. The aging process is a remarkably gradual slope, not a cliff.
Which gives you, the owner, the runway to adapt right alongside them. But since this third act lasts for years, I guess the immediate question becomes, how do we keep the physical stage holding up?
Right, the architecture.
Yeah, and when you are talking about a dachshund, you are immediately forced to confront their most famous and probably most vulnerable architectural feature, their long spine.
The defining physical characteristic of the breed. I mean, it requires specialized attention from day one, sure. But as they age, the structural stakes get much, much higher.
Because things are degrading.
Yeah. The protective habits that owners establish when the dogs are young, using ramps, strictly preventing jumping, those become absolute biological necessities. The aging spine fundamentally changes.
The text mentioned the discs, right?
Exactly. The intervertebral discs that act as shock absorbers naturally lose moisture. They calcify over time, so they basically lose that youthful elasticity.
So I was looking at the notes on muscle mass and the text regarding this, and it feels like a catch-22.
How so?
Well, if we know their intervertebral discs are calcifying and losing moisture, the human instinct is to restrict their movement, right? If their spines are getting fragile, shouldn't we just wrap them in bubble wrap?
Right, buy a stroller and never let them walk again.
Exactly. Just carry them everywhere to completely prevent any risk of a ruptured disc.
It's a completely understandable instinct wanting to shield them like that,
Yeah.
but mechanically, wrapping them in a bubble and carrying them everywhere is actually one of the worst things you can do for a calcifying spine.
Wait, really? Why?
Think of the dachshund's long spine as a suspension bridge. The vertebrae are the road, but the epaxial muscles, which are those thick bands of muscle running down either side of the dog's back, those are the tension cables holding that entire bridge stable.
Oh, wow. So if you overprotect them and stop letting them walk, the cables go slack.
Exactly. You get muscle atrophy.
Hmm.
If they aren't using those back muscles through consistent movement, the muscle literally wastes away.
And without the cables, the bridge is in trouble.
Right. If those muscular cables weaken, the spine itself loses its primary structural support. The calcified discs are suddenly bearing the brunt of every single little movement.
So appropriate activity is actively protective, like physically protective.
Yes, maintaining muscle mass through appropriate activity actively stabilizes the spine. Muscle is the body's natural bubble wrap.
The muscles are the tension cables? That makes so much more sense than just vaguely telling people to, keep your dog fit. And there's another massive factor acting on that suspension bridge too, right? Gravity.
Oh, absolutely.
Specifically weight management.
It is arguably the single most critical factor in their physical longevity. Extra weight on a long, aging spine is just catastrophic.
Because it's literally pulling the bridge down.
Yes. On a purely mechanical level, extra weight places a constant gravitational burden on a suspension bridge that is already dealing with aging cables. Plus, fat isn't just passive weight. It's biologically active tissue that creates systemic inflammation.
So keeping a senior dachshund lean significantly reduces the sheer mechanical stress on those intervertebral discs.
Exactly.
But, okay, protecting that spine by keeping them active creates a very fine line to walk.
It does.
If appropriate activity is required to forge those muscular cables, but we also know the discs and joints are aging and losing elasticity, how do we forge the muscle without breaking the bridge?
You really have to completely redesign their exercise regimen. The core principle highlighted in the sources is transitioning to low-impact, high-frequency movement.
So the days of the 2-hour grueling weekend hike on uneven terrain are completely over.
Long gone. You transition from one massive, exhausting outing to maybe 3 or 4 short, gentle strolls throughout the day.
You're microdosing their exercise.
I love that. Microdosing is the perfect term for it. It keeps the synovial fluid moving in the joints and keeps the muscular cables engaged, but it never pushes the dog past their structural threshold.
And how do you know what that threshold is?
Well, the key metric for you to monitor is their next day recovery.
Meaning what, exactly? Are we looking for them to be limping?
Not even a limp. If you take your senior dog for a 20-minute walk and the next morning they are noticeably stiff, taking an extra beat to get out of bed, or just seem a bit reluctant to stretch,
It's a red flag.
they are giving you vital biomechanical data. Now, the conclusion shouldn't be to eliminate walks entirely.
Right, because of the tension cables.
Exactly. The conclusion is just that 20 minutes caused too much microtrauma for today's joints. So tomorrow, you walk for 10 minutes.
Right.
You constantly adjust the intensity, but you never eliminate the movement.
Makes sense. But redesigning their physical exercise like that creates a massive new problem, doesn't it?
What do you mean?
Well, if we reduce their big physical outings to protect their spine, they are going to spend a lot more time just sitting around at home. And that leads directly to a profoundly bored dog.
Oh, that is a huge point. And it's incredibly dangerous because boredom is one of the primary catalysts for cognitive decline.
Right.
Dogs experience cognitive aging, often referred to as canine cognitive dysfunction, which is essentially doggy dementia. We always expect their bodies to age, but we are frequently caught off guard when their minds age.
And how does that cognitive decline physically manifest? The transcript mentions things like disorientation, but what is actually happening in their head?
It's actual brain atrophy. The brain physically shrinks, and the neural pathways become less efficient.
Wow.
Yeah. Outwardly, this looks like a dog suddenly getting stuck behind a piece of furniture they've navigated around for a decade, or just staring blankly at a wall.
Oh, that's so sad.
It is. You might also see disruptions in their sleep cycles, pacing restlessly all night and sleeping deeply all day. Or they might just withdraw and seem less engaged with the household.
Like the classic human athlete who retires from running marathons, they need something else to do. So how do we fight back against brain atrophy if we can't just take them for a 3-mile run to tire them out?
This raises an important question, right?
Yeah.
We have to distinguish between a dog who is physically tired and a dog who is cognitively understimulated. The source material leans heavily into leveraging their strongest biological asset.
Their nose.
Exactly, the olfactory bulb. Scent games and problem-solving puzzles. You have to understand that a dog's olfactory bulb, the part of the brain dedicated to processing smells, is proportionally massive compared to a human's.
So when they're sniffing, they're really working.
Working hard. When a dog is using their nose to find hidden treats around the living room, they aren't just casually smelling. They are processing complex data.
So you're essentially trading high-impact joint wear for high-impact brain wear.
That's spot on. Scent work forces the brain to fire on all cylinders. It creates new neural pathways. We often confuse a physically tired dog with a mentally fulfilled dog.
Right, because we just assume running is the only way.
But providing that kind of mental gymnastics, making them work out a puzzle toy to get their dinner, it gives them meaningful exhaustion without putting a single ounce of strain on their aging spine.
That brings up a fascinating point about how they actually perceive the world as they age. Because we can visibly see a dog physically slowing down or, getting stuck behind a chair. But what about the physiological changes happening entirely out of our sight?
Sensory shifts.
Yeah, vision and hearing. And what the sources make abundantly clear is that these senses degrade so incrementally that owners frequently completely miss the decline.
That's true. Because dogs are absolute masters of proprioception and mapping.
Right, as a dog's vision slowly dims with things like nuclear sclerosis or cataracts or their hearing fades, they seamlessly lean on their other senses. A dog doesn't just use their eyes to navigate your living room.
No, they use their memory, their nose, the tactile feel of the floor under their paws.
So they just adapt.
They do. So the clues of sensory loss are often incredibly subtle. It's stuff like increased hesitation when transitioning from a brightly lit kitchen to a dim hallway, because their eyes can no longer adjust to light changes quickly.
Or bumping into a coffee table that you only moved 3 inches to the left to vacuum.
Exactly. Or suddenly ignoring a verbal cue like come that they've known since they were a puppy. They aren't suddenly becoming disobedient. The specific frequency of your voice has literally dropped out of their hearing range.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting. Let me push back on this for a second.
Go for it.
Because the source material strongly advocates for shifting veterinary care to twice-yearly wellness exams for seniors, right?
Yes, every 6 months.
But if they are these stoic masters of adaptation, and they gracefully map a room with their nose when their eyes fail, why intervene? Like, why drag a senior dog to the vet every 6 months if they are naturally adapting so beautifully?
Because while a dog can brilliantly mask the loss of their sight or their hearing, they absolutely cannot adapt their way out of failing kidneys. They cannot map a room to fix a compromised liver.
So their outward stoicism is actually a huge liability when it comes to internal organ health.
Precisely. Those twice-yearly vet visits aren't just physical checkups. They are about gathering vital internal baseline data. Blood panels checking BUN and creatinine levels for kidney function, liver enzymes, urinalysis.
All this stuff you can't see.
Right. These tests give your veterinarian a window into the dog's internal ecosystem. Catching a subtle change in kidney function on a blood test allows you to adjust their diet to a kidney-supportive kibble 6 months before the dog ever shows a physical symptom of being sick.
Wow.
Because by the time they physically show you their kidneys are failing, the damage is already severe.
So routine care that feels totally uneventful is actually the goal. Like you are actively paying for boring vet visits.
Boring is the absolute best-case scenario.
Yeah.
And while we're on the topic of internal systems, the transcript draws a massive bright line under dental health.
Oh, yeah. Which owners frequently dismiss as just, dog breath.
All the time.
But how does a bad tooth tie back into all this? Does dental health actually impact their overall aging that much?
Enormously. By the time a dachshund is 10 or 12 years old, they often have a decade of accumulated plaque. But periodontal disease isn't just about the mouth.
Where else does it go?
The bacteria from infected gums enters the bloodstream directly. That bacteria travels throughout the entire body, constantly taxing the immune system. It settles in the joints to cause systemic inflammation.
Wait, it affects their joints?
Yes, and it directly damages the valves of the heart and the filters of the kidneys.
Oh, wow. So a rotting tooth is literally attacking their internal organs every single time their heart beats.
It is. Plus, chronic dental pain completely changes how they eat. A dog will often just swallow their kibble whole to avoid the pain of chewing, so you might not even realize they are suffering.
Because they're still emptying the bowl.
Exactly. But if they stop eating comfortably, they lose nutrition. If they lose nutrition, they lose muscle mass. If they lose muscle mass,
The suspension cables on the spine go slack.
you got it. It is a massive interconnected ecosystem.
Which perfectly brings us to the daily application of all this. Knowing the biomechanics of their spine, the reality of brain atrophy, and the risks of internal inflammation. So what does this all mean? How do we actually translate this into redesigning their daily life in our homes?
Well, it starts with observing their baseline quality of life. Are they resting comfortably, or are they constantly shifting? Do they still seek out affection?
Right.
If there's a meaningful, persistent shift in their baseline, whether it's mobility, joy, or appetite, it warrants a vet visit. Pain often masquerades as just getting old.
Assuming the pain is managed, the source material lists some incredibly practical home tweaks. It's honestly like turning the house into an ergonomic sanctuary, like smart home tech for human seniors.
Yeah, and it doesn't require a total home renovation either. Think about the mechanics we discussed. Non-slip flooring is critical.
Right.
If you have slick hardwood or tile, putting down rubber-backed runner rugs is essential. Why? Because on slick floors, a dog's legs naturally splay outward.
Oh, and to correct that slipping, they have to aggressively tense their back muscles.
Exactly. A senior dog microslipping all day long is putting constant microstrain on those spinal cables. Giving them confident footing physically protects the bridge.
And ramps everywhere, obviously, for the couch, the bed, the car.
And supportive bedding. Orthopedic memory foam beds that don't require them to step high or climb over a thick, awkward bolster just to get into.
Yeah.
You want them to be able to just walk directly onto a supportive surface.
It's not a hospital, it's an upgraded VIP lounge for their golden years. And we also have to adjust the fuel we're putting into that ecosystem, right? We mentioned keeping the weight off, so caloric needs naturally decrease as their metabolic rate slows down.
Usually, yes, but this is highly individual, which is why working with a vet on a senior-specific diet is paramount. You're balancing two conflicting biological needs.
What are they?
You must provide highly digestible, high-quality protein to maintain those crucial muscle cables, while simultaneously reducing overall calories to prevent weight gain that would pull the bridge down.
So when I picture all these changes, the non-slip rugs, the custom ramps, the tailored protein diets, the puzzle toys, it's clear we are building them a fully optimized environment. But the source material makes a really fascinating point that environmental tweaks are basically useless if we ignore their emotional ecosystem.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, this is perhaps the most overlooked aspect of senior care. Emotional inclusion matters just as much as physical ramps.
Because social isolation physically mirrors and accelerates cognitive decline, right?
Yes, dogs are incredibly social mammals. Their brains require social firing to stay sharp. When a dog slows down physically, it is devastatingly easy for a busy family to accidentally leave them out.
Yeah, the family goes to the park and the senior dog gets left on the couch because they can't keep up.
Which is heartbreaking.
It really is, but you can see how easily it happens. You think you are doing them a favor by letting them rest.
Exactly. And occasionally they do need to stay home for their own physical safety. But a dog's mental health thrives on feeling like they are still a valued part of the pack. They still require deep emotional connection to regulate their stress hormones.
Oh, because chronic stress affects them physically.
Yeah, chronic stress from isolation elevates cortisol, which degrades their physical health. They need gentle affection. They need to sit near you while you work. They thrive on familiar, predictable routines. Keeping them actively engaged tells them they are still safe, which biologically lowers stress and supports immune function.
But man, managing all of this, the twice-yearly vet visits, the blood panels, tracking their daily routine, adjusting diets, it is a massive amount of data to keep track of.
It really is.
The source does mention a tool called the Vital Pet app, designed specifically for this, though.
Yeah, having a centralized place to track wellness checks and logs subtle changes in behavior or appetite over time is incredibly powerful.
Because then you aren't just guessing.
Right. It empowers you to go into those 6-month veterinary visits with actual actionable data, rather than just relying on your fuzzy memory of how much water they drank last Tuesday.
Okay, let's bring all of this together. Our mission today was to reframe how we approach an aging dachshund.
Yep.
And by understanding the biomechanics of their spine, microdosing their exercise, trading physical wear for mental gymnastics, and staying aggressively vigilant about their invisible internal baselines, I think we completely shatter the idea that aging is a disease to be feared.
I agree. You're no longer just helplessly watching it decline. You're actively facilitating a rich, adapted life.
Exactly.
This deep dive is really about honoring the bond you've spent years building with your pet. The vigilance that senior care requires, the deliberate slowing down of your own human pace to match their new rhythm, is the ultimate expression of that love.
It really is. And as we wrap up, I want to leave you with a completely different, almost philosophical thought to mull over. Throughout this entire discussion, we've talked about how gracefully these dogs adapt to their biological reality.
They really do.
They lose their sight, and they simply lean into their sense of smell. They can't run miles anymore, so they happily dismantle a puzzle toy in the living room.
Right.
They live entirely in the present moment without any lingering anxiety about the future and without any bitter resentment about the youth they've lost. What if our dog's ability to gracefully accept the physical realities of aging, without that human fear of what comes next, is actually the final, most profound lesson they have to teach us about our own human aging process? Something to think about. Take care, everyone.